I realized that every interaction I have with a loved one, I can choose to either control or connect. It is impossible to do both. And so even in that moment, that cover photo, I could choose to control and be telling him all the things he should try. And here's the reason, or just connect with him.
Hello, everyone. My name is Melanie Whitney. Welcome to the Mindless to Mindful podcast, where we discuss how mindfulness can impact your communication, mindset, and relationships. My hope is that each episode leaves you feeling more empowered and a little more mindful. Hello, my friend. Thank you for being here today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, Miss Kristina, I think a lot of my listeners are very unfamiliar with your very unique and incredible story. And so I would love if you wouldn't mind telling it for the 100th time of kind of where you grew up and how the environment and the conditioning that you grew up with, because I think it's really profound for what we're going to get into when we talk about your new book and just all the beautiful things that you've done, I think, for parents, for women, and really for children across the world.
Awesome. Well, I grew up in Croatia. I didn't immigrate to America till my teen years, and I grew up in a very religious setting. My dad was a pastor. He was the president of Bible Institute there. We lived at the church till I was 9 years old. I mean, it was my whole life, basically, right?
Yeah.
And because of that, and I didn't even realize this till later, we can get into that later, but because of that, I grew up very much there is right and there is wrong. And I was very scared of burning in hell to the point where, if I forgot to pray before I fell asleep, I would wake up the next morning and like beg God to please forgive me, in case Jesus comes back, rapture happens. I want to make
How
sure.
old were you when you were feeling that way?
I mean, honestly, for as long as I can remember, like little, whenever you start first feeling feelings of like guilt or this is wrong, which is probably
Mm,
like 3 or 4, all through elementary school.
wow.
Still in high school, I don't think I was as rigid, but definitely, you know, constantly having the thought of, "Ooh, God's watching. What's going to happen?" And I watched those stupid rapture movies where people are sitting on an airplane and then Jesus comes back and
Stop it.
takes no, I'm not kidding. He takes the good Christians and he leaves the rest of them, and there's fire and yeah. And so I remember being on a flight when I was 9 years old and like grabbing my mom's hand so tight, and she thought I was just scared of flying, but I was like, was I a good enough girl? What if Jesus
Oh,
comes back and he takes my mommy and daddy and I'm left here all by myself? And I don't know how to take care of myself. And then how am I going to deal with the chaos and the violence? I mean, just the crazy thing is at the time it was all normal. Like it was normal to think
yeah.
that way, right? And everybody else was wrong. I was one of the fortunate ones that knew the secret to eternal life, and all these people didn't. It was my job to bring my Bible everywhere and tell people. And how many people did you tell about Christ? Um, yeah, but other than that, I had a great childhood. And
Other than all of that.
I actually thought it was great at the time. When I was 12, a war started in Croatia, so that obviously was not fun. But
Oh, that's right.
yeah, until then,
Okay.
really all of it was normal because most of my friends were Christians. Most of our family friends were Christians. Like I didn't any outside people that I knew, if anything, I just felt sorry for them because they were going to burn.
Mm.
So I didn't see it as a bad thing until later. I was like, huh, I wonder where all this anxiety comes from. Hmm.
So when did you and why did you end up coming to the States? What drew you over here? What brought
So
your journey
my dad had, traveled the world and taught at different theological seminaries, preached at different churches. And he had the opportunity to come and be like a part-time professor at a seminary in the US. And because of the war in Croatia, my family was like, let's take this opportunity and get our
here?
kids to safety. And they never planned on staying. From the beginning, the story was, we're going there until things calm down and then we'll go back. And so they all did go back. And I ended up staying.
Okay. And how old were you again? You said when you came and stayed?
When I came, I was 14. Not a great time. Like starting your freshman year of high school and you're covered in zits and you got
Oh,
every insecurity. Not a great time to move to a different country and different culture and have an accent.
I don't think it's any of the books that's recommended. No.
No, no, that's that's not good.
So wait, did in high school did you go back and then come back again as an adult? Or did you stay?
No,
When did everybody go back?
they went back when I was in college.
Oh, got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we would still go back every summer.
Okay.
My parents still kept their home there. The plan was, it was never like we moved. It was, we're staying here for a little bit.
Okay. And so, okay, so my next question then, so now everybody has a little bit of basis that how you grew up in a very religious household. The war broke out in Croatia, which that's a whole other thing that we could talk about, right? And then you essentially flee here. Now, Christina, you have a very unique thing that you do for a living now.
Yeah.
But back then, what did you think your career was going to be? Or did you not even think about a career? Were you just thinking about, I need to get married and have babies?
Well, when I was in high school, I got really into theater. I think it's because that
Mm.
was the only place where they accepted weirdos like the foreign
Where
Croatian
you
girl.
could be your authentic self.
Yeah, because I mean, people thought I was weird because if a textbook fell off a desk and made the loud sound, it reminded me of war sounds. And I would like leap, and people were like, what's wrong? 14-year-olds are, at the time, at least in the 90s, were not super empathetic. They're just like, she's
No.
great. So I started doing theater, and the theater director at high school just like embraced me, and I got tapes to lose my accent so I could have bigger roles. And so I decided I would study theater. But my dad really wanted me to study theater in a Christian school. So nothing against Christian schools, but I think that was probably limiting in some ways because there are
Okay.
strict rules on what you're allowed to say on stage. Like we'd have to change scripts,
Ah.
you know.
Yes,
Um,
censored, censored.
yeah, but I think my plan was, if I'm fortunate enough, like I'm definitely gonna getting married, like straight out of college, which I did, because that's what good Christian girls do. And then I'm gonna have babies, and then maybe I can make, part time, do some theater, local theater, and that's how I'm gonna make my
Okay.
living.
Oh
Yeah,
my God. Is this is it, it would I'm laughing over here because I know the entirety of your story, right? Because we're friends. But I'm just like, it blows my mind that you grew up with such a heavy indoctrination and you're not the only one. I bet you people listening right now are like, yeah, I grew up in a house like that, or grew up in other, types of conditioning and limiting beliefs, and this is right and this is wrong, different moral compasses, if you will,
yeah.
right? And so let's fast forward the story a little bit. Spoiler alert, you get married very young.
I 3 weeks after I graduated college,
Three?
3 weeks.
Okay, not 3 years, three
No, no,
weeks.
no, no. Gosh, that would be like old to get married at 25. Are you?
You'd be expired.
Which, by the way, do you know that the prefrontal cortex of our brain is not developed till like 25, 26? So, yeah, I mean, probably not a great idea making a
You
decision at that age.
probably shouldn't be allowed.
I was engaged at 21 and married at 22.
Okay. And then you were separated at what age?
So, I actually was going to leave my marriage, my first year marriage. And then I found out that I was
Oh.
pregnant. And there was
Mm.
no way my kid was going to grow up in a divorce home. And so I was going to stick it out and make it work. And
For
then
the children.
with the children. And then when he was 10 months old, I got pregnant, not accidentally, on purpose with my daughter, because I was going to stay anyway and I wanted to have more than one kid.
Mm.
And then when she was a year and a half, I finally left. And that was not what good Christian girls do.
And that is when you went rogue. That is when
Yeah.
you started building your own life.
Yeah.
So tell me what was the breaking point for you when you were like, this is enough now? Because you're fighting
Yeah.
years of conditioning of this is the way you live, this is what's right, and this is what's wrong. And I think many of us have different things of what that looks like, and we all have different thresholds in which we can take. And so what was your breaking point?
So I need to be careful how I word this because I'm very respectful about not talking
Yes,
about other
of
people,
course.
But I just got to a place where I I did not have a good self-esteem in that relationship, and I felt like it was
Okay.
only going to get worse. And I didn't even know that maybe I deserved better or different. I just knew that it felt very unhealthy. And
Mm.
ultimately, I didn't think my children would benefit from me staying married. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
I remember hearing a quote that said, "It's better for children to come from a broken home than live in a broken home." And literally hearing
Oof.
that made me go, "Okay, I got it now. I'm out."
So that clicked
Yeah,
for you.
just hearing it worded that way, I was like, "That's true. It's going to
Mm.
be tough. Divorce is not fun for anyone, but is daily living in something unhealthy better?"
Yeah, and they say that you're you're not going to make a change until you get sick and tired of being sick and tired,
Yeah.
right? You really have to hit that place. And I get that question in my line of work a lot is, well, how do you know when enough is enough? How do I know if I should leave? How do I know if, I should set a boundary? How do I know if, and we all desire this prescription, if
Hmm.
you will, for life, for parenting, for marriage. And as you've talked a lot about in your first book and your second book, that's not how it goes, folks.
No,
That's not how
there's
life
no
works.
recipe. There is not a recipe.
Coming from a cook, there's no
Yeah,
recipe.
trust me. I thought there was, and I tried to follow it, and it did not end well. So, yeah.
During that period, Christina, what do you think was the hardest thing for you to let go of while
When
you were
like,
shifting your whole paradigm, leaving, getting a
right.
divorce, it going against everything that you were taught to be right
So
versus wrong?
I haven't talked about this part very much publicly because again, I'm very protective of other people. But divorce, anybody who's gone through divorce, even without kids, awful, feels like a death. And when you're the one making the decision, you feel like a murder. There's a lot of guilt that comes
Mm,
with it. Okay. And then on top of that, I had a 1.5 and a 3-year old. So that adds a whole nother level. Am I destroying their lives? Is this the right? And on top of that, I didn't ask for any child support or anything. I just walked off. So now I have big financial stuff.
yeah.
That would have been awful and hard on its own. What was the hardest part for me, and this is the part I don't talk much about publicly, is that there were people in my life who I thought highly of
Mm,
and who I expected unconditional love from,
yeah.
um, who felt like this was the worst thing I could do to my children. I didn't love my children. I wasn't a
Yeah.
good mom for, forcing them to grow up in a divorced home. How could I break up a marriage? And just added so much shame and guilt. I actually heard the words more than once: God will punish you for that. God will
Oof.
punish you for this. And I'm still at a point where I haven't unraveled all the stuff that I've been taught. So I'm dealing with these people that I thought would not necessarily be happy that I'm getting a divorce, but go, you know what? We don't agree with divorce, but what do you need?
Are
Um,
you okay?
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it was very much delivered to me in the sense of we love you, and that's why. It's kind of like compare it to when a friend of mine was telling me about coming out to his parents, and they're like, "No, we love you. We just don't agree. So therefore, you can't bring your boyfriend over. You can't. There are all these rules. You're not going to be as close part of our life."
Yeah, they avoid the responsibility, but like it's not me, but God says, so I care about you and da
So
da
it's
da.
very much
Yeah.
like we love you and we love your children, and you know we feel that this is an evil, awful thing you're doing. So what that did to me is on top of the already big pile of crap I was feeling about my situation and myself.
Yeah.
Now these people that again I thought loved me unconditional are
Yeah.
basically turning their back on me and saying all the things that nobody wants to hear. No young mom wants to hear, you're ruining your children's lives. They will hate you someday, or, God will punish. And that made me sink into a pretty low depression. I mean, to the point where I hate to even say this out loud, but I was researching like, how do you take your life without, making it look like an accident?
Yep.
Because then my kids won't feel like she didn't love us enough to stick around. I was so
Mhm.
convinced that my children deserve better.
Mhm.
Um, and I look back now and I'm like, damn, I think that's my proudest moment, which is interesting because at the time I thought it was my worst moment. But I look back and I'm like, you had all these people saying this stuff. You had all this stuff going against you. You were sleeping on a floor sharing a small room with your kids. I couldn't even afford a mattress for a while. Finally, a friend gifted me a mattress. I'm literally sleeping on the floor. I'm on food stamps. I'm a friend of mine who works at Starbucks is bringing me the stale Starbucks stuff they can't sell anymore, and that's what I'm eating with my children. Like I am, and I still did it. I still left. I still did what felt right to me. I look at that now and I go, man, I can't even believe that I was embarrassed or felt low. Like that was a badass move. That was so brave of me to do with no support.
Yes, Christine, that is the one thing I admire most about you. I don't know if I've ever said this to you because I was like, have you know, you forget. Did I say this to my friend? Did I say this out loud? But your resilience
Mm.
is one of the most inspiring things about you. And your ability to have healed and processed heavy feelings like shame and put it in a freaking book and say here everybody read it learn from me, like that takes a tremendous amount of courage. And when you look at your life now and I see your beautiful family and I see the incredible things that you guys have overcome that you share so beautifully, and Luca your son shares so beautifully in this book, oh my God, like it looks like you've lived different lives. Like you had, like you reincarnated and came back for a
No, I
new
feel
life.
that. Like I'm 45. I feel like I'm 90 because I'm like, how did I fit so much in one? But what you're talking about with the resilience and man, that takes a lot of work. Like that is not, and I always want to say that because I think people are like, well, I tried and it didn't work. Like I really tried being brave and I tried. And it's not, it's just like one sit up won't give me a six pack. Very unfortunate, by the way. And I tested it more than once. It's like an ongoing thing. And I still, after everything, and even being able to look back and go, I'm so proud of that girl, I still have to work so hard at it. And I think that's one of the very difficult and complicated things about being a human, but it's also such a beautiful thing because you
Mm.
realize, wow, the one thing I can control in this crazy world where I can't control much, or in parenting where we think we have control, but we don't. The one thing I can control is how I treat myself.
Oof.
And everything comes down to that for me. I can't control this, that, other people's opinions, work stress, finance. Oh, I can't control it.
Yeah.
But how am I going to treat myself through those hard days? And the fact that I was willing to leave an unhealthy situation because that's what I needed long
Hmm.
term. That's the part I'm proud
As you should be.
of.
As you should be. And I love this. What part of why I wanted to have you as a guest, and I think part of what makes our friendship work is how transparent and authentic you are. And I think people feel that when you are doing your stand up or when you're writing your book or you're doing your hilarious content on Instagram. Like we feel that that is something that you cannot fabricate, that on like authenticity. There's something I believe inside us as human beings. We have like these kind of like these bullshit meters of whether somebody is being authentic
Mhm.
or not about their story. And I think you've always shown up that way. And I think that's really kind of what has helped you heal and inspire so many people.
Yeah, I don't know if I ever told you this, but well, basically, years ago, I was given a cooking show by Oprah, and it wasn't
Oh,
her
let's just casually graze
fault.
over that.
I'm getting to something much more important. So I'm like,
Okay, you're like, here, people, here's the context.
and I got stuck with producers who decided that I had to be a perfect mom in a perfect kitchen, and everything had to be perfect, and I couldn't make any mistakes. And I was begging them to let me do an episode where my kids are throwing a tantrum in the background, and I have mascara running down my face because I hadn't taken my makeup off from 2 days ago, and something's burning on the stove. I'm like, please let me do that because that's what moms need to see. And they wouldn't. And it ended up being
Mm,
this show that I really wasn't proud of. Anyway, again, not Oprah's fault. Oprah loves
no.
authenticity.
Yeah.
So after that, I remember just feeling so like fake. Like I hated, I mean, I should have been psyched. Like, oh my gosh, I used to sleep on the floor. Now I have a cooking show and I'm getting paid. This is amazing. And instead I felt, I don't even know how to describe it. I felt dirty. And that was the moment. And this was before I was creating all my online content. That was the moment that I decided that anything I put out there in the world, anything I create, whether it's another TV show or whatever, I want to be for others what I needed when I was at my lowest.
Mm.
That is now, it drives everything I do. So when you say that you see transparency and authenticity, it's because everybody in their lowest moments, that's what they crave. They don't need to see someone perfect. They don't need to hear how great you are and how easy parenting is. And, they just want someone who's going to go, me too. Life is freaking hard. And so whether it's my funny content or my serious content, that's sort of like my mission statement.
Mm.
Would this be something that I would want that girl that was sleeping on the floor watching? And how would it make her feel?
That's an incredible North Star to have.
It's been like the most beautiful thing because it always centers me. Always centers me. And anybody that's on social media, you have phases where it's not going well, and all of a sudden I'm not making money doing this, and brand deals are not out. And if I didn't have that, I probably would have quit a long time ago. But every time I had those phases, I was like, no, 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 no. What's the big goal? Can you still put stuff out there that you needed when you were at your lowest? It just has always been a way to center myself and prioritize the things that should be prioritized.
I love that. And that actually, why don't we share with people what your second book is
Ooh.
about? And then I have some beautiful things that I pulled that I would love to ask you about.
Okay. Well, after I thought I'd gone through all the bad stuff in my life, all the hard stuff, my oldest son started struggling with his mental health. I thought it was just typical teenage hormones. Because, as I write in my book, I was coming from a place of assumption instead of a place of curiosity. And it got really bad. He sunk into a deep depression. I found out that he was suicidal. He started coping by taking any drug he could get his hands on. A lot of times it was just pot, but it was laced with a lot of stuff that was dangerous, opioids. Um, it just got really bad. It got to a point where at one point I had to call the police on him to have him taken in for a psychiatric hold. He was violent. There was just a lot. And I once again felt clueless. I once again felt like that mom back then that my son deserves better because I don't know what I'm doing. So throughout all that, I made a lot of mistakes and I learned a lot. And then eventually my son who's usually very private, decided to make a video with me where we just had a candid conversation. He literally was like, I don't want to talk about the video ahead of time. I don't want to know what you're going to ask me. Let's just have a candid conversation because what helped me the most, Mom, is hearing from people my age. So maybe if somebody sees this video, it'll help them because kids are hearing from therapists and doctors. They need to hear from other kids. We sat down and we filmed, and it was the longest video. I don't usually post long videos. It was a 20-minute conversation, very blunt about everything. He literally was like, we can talk about it all. And that led to this book, which is titled, I Can Fix This, and Other Lies I Told Myself While Parenting My Struggling Child. And he actually wrote the last chapter, which is so beautiful because you get to hear from a mom who's just trying to navigate and figure this thing out and dealing with her own crap that she brings into parenting that she didn't realize she brought into parenting. And then at the end, you get to hear from my son directly.
Yes, and I love that you guys did that. And I love that Luca is so brave. He's so young and so brave to share that. And I have no doubt because I have family members and friends that have struggled with very similar things, and some of them are still in the thick of it, right? And I think sometimes when it just takes the right story or the right person to share and communicate the information. And I also think you'll help a lot of parents who, God, are navigating that treacherous waters of uncertainty and loss of control, which you talk a lot about.
That was one of the hardest things, was for me to decide that I'm going to be okay if I have to sit in uncertainty. It still sometimes feels like torture. And again, to realize how little control I have, really. But the main thing I really want this book to do, and Luca feels the same way. Because it's not like you're going to get, here are 3 tips how to make your child healthy.
No, it is definitely not that.
Yeah. And that doesn't exist, by the way, so stop looking for that book. My main goal with this is I just really want whoever, once they finish the last page, to go, wow, I don't feel shame about my mental health anymore. I don't feel shame about my child's mental health. I no longer feel those questions of what will so-and-so think? And did they see me? I had those questions like, my neighbors just saw the cops come. What do they think? And I ran into in the emergency room. He was on a psychiatric hold waiting for a bed in a psychiatric hospital. And I make eye contact with somebody who works at the hospital whose wife loves my videos. I'm like, oh, great. What is she? She's going to tell her. And he probably saw the police bring my son. Like all that junk that we give way too much energy to. So that's a long way of saying that I hope that the book just helps get rid of the shame, because yes, depression is awful, anxiety is awful, all that stuff is awful and painful and so hard. But I believe personally that what is killing a lot of people is the shame. And I think if we can get rid of the shame, we're going to save so many lives.
Oh yeah, and there's data to support what you just said that, shame it cripples us, it prevents us, it freezes us from ever healing anything,
Yeah.
right? It's Brene Brown has so much incredible research out there about, the one thing you can do is share your story and then receive empathy, and that shame just cannot survive. It
Yeah.
has to dissipate.
I remember after Luca and I posted that video I mentioned, I got more than one comment from people. How, like, what are you doing allowing him to talk about this so publicly? They were just so appalled that he was, I let him, or maybe
Hmm.
they thought I made him
Hmm.
talk about being depressed and suicidal and being in a psychiatric hospital. And I responded, I made a video response and I said, I'm wondering if you would have had this, made the same comments if my son and I had opened up that he has, I don't know, for example, cancer. No, you wouldn't.
Nope.
You know why? Because you're attaching shame to it. I'm not. My son isn't. You're attached. You're deciding that this is something we shouldn't talk about or he's going to regret later. Um, so yeah, we got a
Man,
long way to go.
I'm like, how do you just not want to be like, tuck, 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 like type all the things, out to those people? Be like, well, you know what? Susan 305.
Sometimes I just reply to negative comments with no thank you. As in, I'm not picking that up. And they get so confused. They're like, what do you mean no?
What do
No, thank
you?
you. Because I picture them handing me this judgment. And no, thank you. I see
I'll
it.
return to sender.
Yeah, exactly. Wrong number. Click.
One of my good friends has a saying where she says, I am energetically unavailable for this.
Oh my gosh, I gotta steal that. That is hilarious.
I was like, oh, girl, I'm going to say that for everything now. Unsubscribe.
Yeah.
But so I love that there's this quote I wrote down from your book, and specifically you were talking about how parents can better serve their children. But I think this applies to just everybody we love, right? And how we worry about how can I show up in the right way and da, 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 right? We want that prescription. So I just want to read this little bit because I think it's again, I think it applies to more than just the parent-child relationship. You said, and you're talking about Luca, I believe it says, my child is the only expert at being themselves. I am here simply to listen, ask questions, listen more, and then ask, what is the best thing I can do to help you today? So simple.
Yeah.
But why I loved that is because you put yourself in a reflective position, not judging, you're listening, right? And I talk a lot about mindful communication and mindfulness, and that requires you to listen before it requires you to seek to understand the person before you try to give advice. Or we're so quick to give advice, we're so quick to judge, we're so quick to say, well, I think this is how we should fix something. But what you said here is you're like, just to listen a little more, to gather more information, right, to understand essentially. And then you ask, how can I help? You don't say, here are all the ways I think we should do to do this. And so I'm wondering what was the catalyst to help, give you that learning, essentially, to turn that light bulb on?
Well, I think where I got tricked into believing, and a lot of this has to do with, watching other people parent, or, even the way I was parented. I thought that a good mother, or you can say a good friend, or, because it's not just with parenting, comes with solutions. I'm
Mm.
going to solve it. I'm going to make this better. And the truth is, the best way to make it better is, again, to come from a place of curiosity, right? And I remember at the time when my son he was really at his lowest. I remember hearing a friend of mine, Jason, say that the most beautiful thing you can do for someone, I don't know why I get teary every time I say this sentence, by the way, is to stand in awe of their story.
Mm.
And it hit me one day, oh my gosh, I'm coming with so many assumptions. I know my kid, I know teenagers, I know what this needs, I understand mental health, I've been depressed. I'm not standing in awe of Luca's story. And it's not like I learned it and then it was great, but it was a reminder I kept giving myself. Are you standing in awe of his story right now? And then the whole idea of asking him, what can I do to support you today? So almost every day I try to tell him, you know, what can I do to support you? And the reason that became important to me, yes, for the things you mentioned, listening, making sure that, I'm validating his experience and learning from the expert that he is on being himself. But also, throughout this process, I realized that I didn't trust myself at all. I didn't trust, and to be honest, and I don't mean to bash any religion because, you know, I'm not against that or faith or anything. I just think there's healthy ways and unhealthy ways. Um, One of the things that I was taught growing up, hearing from church leaders and stuff, is you can't trust yourself. You always go to God. And what I didn't realize until later is that's one of the reasons I felt inadequate and stupid, because how could I know? I can't. So,
Yeah, it was like,
one of
who are
the,
you, Kristina, to think you
yeah.
could? Yeah.
And one of the things that I wanted my children, especially to know when they're struggling, is trust yourself. If you ask someone, how can I best support you today? You are basically telling them, I trust that you know yourself. I want you to trust yourself and then share that with me. And I'm just here to support. So
Mm.
it's not just a gift of validation you're giving them, and you're seen, and I want to hear and I want to learn. You're teaching them to trust themselves. And I think that's one of the most important things we need to get through this life.
1,000%. With all the coaching that I do, guess what? Adults don't trust themselves.
Yeah.
And that's really what we're rebuilding. And it's because of not just religious conditioning, but our society wants us to constantly seek outward for answers,
Hmm.
not inward. They're like, no, 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 you don't have the answer. This book has the answer. This thing has the
Yeah.
answer. Right? You're always seeking outside of yourself.
I share in the book this story how I was in a Pilates class, and and I'm not athletic. Like, I don't mean I'm not athletic, like I can't get a ball in a hoop. Like, if you try to high five me, I will miss. Okay, not athletic.
Facts. We've had to redo some high fives.
Yes. And so I'm in this Pilates class, standing on the Pilates reformer. For anybody that does Pilates, it's like a torture machine. And the coach has us in this awful, like inhumane position. And I'm standing there and I'm trying to focus. And then all of a sudden I start going, wait, is this difficult for everybody else? I'm starting to shake. Is everybody else starting to shake? Is my form worse than everybody else's? And I'm not kidding you. The instant I turn my head to see what everybody else is doing, I fall into like my butt is in the well
No.
of the reformer. It was a big fall. I had bruises, okay? And I'm in there and I busted out laughing because it immediately hit me that every time I have taken my focus off my own practice to check how somebody else is doing, are they doing it better? Do they have all the answers? Are they struggling too? I lost my balance every single time, not just
Mm.
in Pilates, but in life. And that's the whole thing about, oh, this is what I was going to say. As I'm getting myself back up, the coach, who's also a friend of mine, she yells at me, trust yourself.
Stop it.
And I'm driving home that day and I go, what does she mean by that? Like, trust yourself. Like, I'm not good at Pilates. I don't know how to do this. Why should I trust myself? And as I'm driving home, I realize, oh, no, no, she's not saying trust that you're perfect at Pilates. Trust that you know your strengths and weaknesses. Trust that you know when you need to take a break. Trust that you know when to seek out advice or get support. So I think about that so much, about how when I don't trust myself, I fall off. I fall
Mm.
down.
I love that. And I'm sure you've heard of this work, but they talk about when you say you're talking about not trusting yourself and you're like, what does she mean? And you're like going into it. So many adults, because of trauma, because of, very intense events that we've been through, we have to, if you've ever had to be a survivor in your life, your brain has had to override what your body was trying to tell you, and you're like, nope, shut it down, and we gotta push through, we gotta do this, we don't have time to cry right now, whatever it is, right? we learn to override. And if you keep overriding over and long enough, you don't know how to trust yourself.
Yeah.
You don't know how to reconnect back to that intuition, that emotional body. So you're like, what the hell do you mean trust myself? You mean my brain? Like, what do you mean? What does
Yeah.
that look like?
Yeah.
So I think it's a beautiful analogy that you've given. And I've seen you do a lot of work to restore that mind body connection to trust yourself.
Yeah. It's going to be lifelong work, but again, not to compare it to work. I don't know why I keep bringing working out because it's not my favorite thing. Um, but to compare it to that again, it's like you hear people who, they start working out and they're like, oh, and it's a lot of work, but I feel better. Like they see
Mm,
the results and it's worth it. That's how I feel about the emotional mental work that I've done. I'm actually excited to keep working. I'm excited to fail sometimes. I don't even call it failing, I call it learning, because it's going to give me an opportunity for even more growth, because I like myself so much more now. I like my life more. I handle bad days better. None of it is perfect. I'm far from perfect, but I am so accepting of the fact that I'm a flawed human being. I'm so accepting of the fact that my family is flawed, that our relationships are flawed. And I it's such a freedom. I don't even know a better word for it. Such a freedom. I guess peace is a good word. There's a peace in it that I don't ever want to give up.
ugh, I love that. And like you said, it's continuous, and I think that's the best way to be excited about the continued journey, be excited about the continued development. There's another part of your book, I can't remember what chapter, I think it was towards the end, where you discuss your wonderful husband
Mhm.
and the beautiful marriage that you two have, and I've gotten the privilege to see and feel and be in your energy and be in your love. And I l- I was surprised and also not surprised, just because I know how, again, authentic you are, but you share a tough period that you both went through where you're like, we were roommates and shit was hard. And
And when I say
I
roommates, like not even talking much to each other, roommates.
that's what you said. Yeah, in the book. And I was like, "Oh my goodness." And just because I've seen the result now, right? What I see now, and I love that. I think it's so important that these representations, like you said, about parenting, but also about marriage, that, people, when I do my work or do workshops, they're like, "Oh, it must be so wonderful to be married to you." And I'm like, "Oh, talk to my wife." Like, no. Like, I can be a terror sometimes. Are you joking? So I loved the authenticity about you guys went through like some rough times. And I can't remember, I didn't write down exactly what question he asked you, or did you ask him? Like, are you done?
Yeah, are
Are
you
you,
done? Are
mm,
you done with this marriage? I right in this so this our marriage started to suffer during everything with Luca's mental health.
yeah.
And I actually found out through support groups. I forget what the percentage is, but there's a very large percentage of divorce when your child is struggling,
Mm,
especially when it's like hospitalizations, police, like it's just a lot, right? And anybody who's gone through this with their kid, they know just the amount of time you have to spend making appointments and filling out, like it's just so. In the midst of all that, marriage started to feel like yet another thing on my to-do list,
yep.
a to-do list that was already suffocating me. And so, people say, "Oh, we just grew apart." I don't think people grow apart. They actively pull apart.
Mm. Yeah, we
Uh,
make decisions every day that pull us
yes,
apart. Yeah.
and sometimes subconsciously, right? Like we don't even
Yes.
realize we're
Yes.
making those decisions. Because I no longer, after going through that hard time with my husband and now being in a really good place, I don't believe that stress breaks up marriages. People break up marriages. And so if
Mm,
and one of the problems is that I wasn't working on healing me. My focus was my son, and then my other kids are struggling because my son is struggling, and everything
yep.
feels like it's falling apart. And I thought I was taking care of me. I was going to the support groups and everything, but I kind of compare it to when you have people coming over and you just sort of like clean up stuff off the counter so it looks clean, but you don't actually like open the cabinets and go, "Oh my gosh, there's so much crap in here that I no longer need, that I need to donate," right? I wasn't doing the deep cleaning. So
Ah,
I think a lot of people convince themselves they're doing the work, but really they're just doing surface level. Oh, a little therapy session here, but I'm not going to go too deep.
mm.
Um, and then, yeah, we had this very blunt conversation in the bathroom. And decided not to give up yet. And I don't know where I got the idea with Luca first. Whenever I was, he was like yelling or not being able to hear me, I started writing out something I needed him to know or
Oh,
wanted to
that's
ask him,
right.
and I would
Yes,
give
the
it to him.
letters.
And so anyway, my husband and I are in the bathroom having this conversation of, are you done with this marriage? And I said, I have this crazy idea. Can we email each other every single day? And those emails literally saved our marriage. We email each other every single day for months,
Wow.
months. And what those emails did is they allowed us to express without seeing the facial expression of, oh, I'm now they're annoyed,
Oh,
or
you're
me
judging me.
or me getting defensive, and I already know what I'm going to respond to that. I'm just going to wait for you to finish your sentence because I got some. We were able to get it all out. We were able to take the time to reread the thoughts of our spouse 3-4 times, right? Choose how we want to word our response. We ended up going so deep. I found out things from his childhood I never knew. We had already been married for 10 years. I discovered just from emailing my own stuff that I was bringing into the marriage that was not healed. It was amazing. And still to this day, we have this little rule. We don't email each other every day anymore, but we have this rule that if we are in a conversation that we don't feel is productive, and one
Mm,
of us says, we're going to stop this right now and we're going to email, we have to email within the next 24 hours. And it's
mm.
worked. So what it did is it made our time together so much better because we weren't worried about this long list of things we got to discuss. We knew the emails would take care of that. We
Yeah.
were just able to just enjoy each other. And then eventually, as we healed, then we could actually bring those emails into, face to face conversation. Anyway, it was like the most incredible thing for our marriage.
I love that. That was the last thing I was expecting when I was reading the chapter. I was like, "What? Emails?" I was like, "Get out of here."
It
But
sounds
then
so silly.
it was silly, but you know what? It made me reflect and think about my own marriage. There was a period that Mecca and I went through that was very tough, and we were apart and emailing and long text messages at the time. I think it was like on our Blackberries or something. I don't even remember. Um, it helped reconcile and rebuild the trust that we needed to rebuild. And
Mm,
it, like you said, it offered that asynchronous communication where it's not in real time. It lets you think. It
yeah.
lets you sit with something. Oh my God, I can't remember how many times I would type something out and I reread it later and like, that's a little angry. Maybe I should delete,
Yeah.
delete,
Yeah.
delete. Right.
But also, it brings me back to what you were saying earlier about telling the person basically, you're an expert at you. Tell me more.
Hmm.
That's one of the most beautiful things I think you can say to a person. Tell me more.
Yes.
And so there would be times where I would say, "Hey, this sentence didn't make sense to me. Can you go deeper with this? Can you
Mm,
explain it?" And then I'd get paragraphs back, and I would go, "Oh, I'm learning so much about this person. Now I know how to love them better.
uh,
Now I know how to communicate what I need
yeah.
better to them." I mean, it was amazing.
I
Emails.
love it. Email. Did you keep those emails? Do you
We
guys
have
still have
all of
them?
them. We
Oh,
have all of them.
I
Never
love
want to go.
that.
And he just emailed me a few days ago because I got annoyed about something, and he's a tax accountant, so he's busy with tax season, and I'm
Oh,
busy with my tour coming up. And it wasn't even a big argument. It was just we were just kind of annoyed. And he sent me this beautiful email just saying where he was coming from and why his reaction was and what annoyed him and blah blah. And I just sat there
oh.
reading and going, if he had said that in the moment to my face, I would not have been able to go, oh, I'm so glad you shared that with me. But for some reason, I was able to just sit with it and be so grateful. And also, what a gift you're giving somebody, especially when life is busy, to go, I took the time to communicate with you. And I
Yeah.
took the time to read over it and make sure that I was communicating, not from a place of ego or insecurity, but just
Yep.
really from my raw self. So, yeah.
I love that, and it just forces us to slow down, and I think I have a feeling some people will be trying this. Either if it's writing a letter, sending a text message, an email's nice because you can, get into more depth. So hopefully that people do try it because, I mean, they got from both of us that we've both tried it
Yeah,
and it
it
served
works.
our marriage.
Money back guarantee. All the money
Funny.
you spend writing that email.
I love it. So there's the last thing I wrote that I think would be a good way for us to wrap up our conversation. There's two quotes that I absolutely loved from I think it was the last chapter and the one before Luca's.
Mhm.
It says you had wrote these two things. So I'm going to say both, even though they were from separate places. So the
Okay.
first one you say is, when I operate from a place of fear, I'm giving the world the worst version of myself. Oof, that landed with me because I talk a lot about ego in my work and how a lot of disconnection in relationships is because we're coming from a place of scarcity and fear. And when you show up in that, nothing good comes from that. How are you going to connect? How are you going to show? How are you going to love? How are you going to be compassionate, empathetic, and present, right? Fear takes us into the future that
Mhm.
doesn't exist, and it's a terrible future that we are constructing. So one, I just wanted to say I love that, and I want to give you a chance to reply to that if you want to, and then I have another quote that I want to read to you.
I mean, I still notice it because obviously I'm still working on things. I have never um, connected deeply or experienced healing with my child or my spouse or friend when I operated from a place of fear, ever. And so now I just need that reminder of, okay, do you want a positive outcome here? Because it's not going to happen if you come from a place of fear. And it's very hard for people who are controlling, like me.
Oh, girl, me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was that was one of the, I think, toughest things when at first when I found out I had anxiety when my therapist was like, "You have anxiety." I was like, "What?" Right? What do you mean? I just like to control everything. What are you talking about? But when I started seeing fear as like an ingredient and I wouldn't be able to cook this amazing dish of connection and love and support if I'm like dousing all this fear
Yeah.
inside of the pot. Like, what? No,
Yeah.
absolutely not. So that just jumped out at me. And then the last quote, which was like, I'm like, this, everybody in the world needs to read this. Not just if they get anything from this book, right? Okay, it says, you say, maybe surrendering doesn't mean giving up. Maybe it means opening up. Maybe it means taking a breath and instead of doing, just being. Maybe it means finding peace even while sitting in uncertainty.
Mhm.
Bam, close the book, drop the mic, folks. Done. My
Oh,
favorite, Christina, my favorite.
tell me how that resonated for you. I know you're supposed to be interviewing me, but
Yeah, but I'm gonna break the rules.
yeah, yeah.
Um, oh my God. It's the epitome of, I think, the human experience. Like the gift I'm trying to give the world through my work is be present,
Mm.
stay out of judgment, and just be in the moment without any attachments, any expectations, right? But I find that the reason people struggle with being mindful, living mindfully, thinking mindfully, speaking mindfully is because they have no tolerance for the discomfort and uncertainty that is life.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a capacity for that, you're going to be in this constant state of fear, fight, flight. You're always in resistance to the present moment if you can't tolerate uncertainty.
Yeah. And
And
I
so,
thought, go ahead.
no, I was going to say, so that's why I was like, I
Yeah.
love this. Yeah.
And I thought that if I wasn't doing, fixing, ready, planning, controlling, that I was passive. I used to tell people all the time, that's one of my least favorite things. I can't stand people who are passive because life is hard and you got to go out there and you got to fix it and you got to make it happen. And I realized, like I said, that surrendering is not actually giving up. It's not being passive. It's being open. And what I started to do with Luca is instead of thinking, what can I do for him
Mhm.
today? Who can I be for him today? I can be supportive. I can be loving. I can listen. I can stand in awe of his story.
Mhm. And God, how different the world and our relationships would be if we could just show up like that. I mean, yeah, this goes if for anyone listening, go read this book. They can find it everywhere.
Yeah.
It's going, and honestly, I don't think it's just for people who are parents. I think anyone who has a loved one they've struggled with mental health, if they have struggled with mental health themselves, it's just you so beautifully write the book in such a way that is so relatable and so human, but also leaves so much room. I think often when we talk about our humanity, we say, "Oh, I'm flawed. Of course, I'm human," right? But there's also this beautiful resilience and compassion of the human experience, of the human soul and spirit. And I think you capture that beautifully, especially between you and your son. And the photo on the cover is, I think, everything.
My husband took that. This was about a week after my son had been hospitalized in a residential center. And we were in Croatia, my homeland, which is my favorite place to be. And we're walking down this little path, and Luca had the worst day. He had punched tiles. He used to do that, and he had all the time just scabs on his arms. And that was his version of self-harming. He hid under a bed for like 3 hours earlier that day, just wanting to disappear from the world. And here we were walking. I convinced him to go to dinner with me, and my husband was behind us. And I was just trying to support my son through his rough day. And my husband took a picture. This never was I going to write this book, by the way. He took a picture just thinking, I want Kristina to look back someday on this and go, we got through that. And now it's the cover of the book, which is crazy.
Philip's a little, is he psychic? Did he know?
No.
I mean, the picture, people, when you go see it, you'll see the photo. It's just a beautiful, and thank you for sharing the story behind the photo, because it does almost look staged because it's so
Right?
perfect. It's beautiful where you guys are. But I think that's also captures the duality of life, that there are quote unquote good things, right, that are happening, and quote unquote bad things are happening. And it's like, well, how do you want to view this? How do you want to capture and view this moment? So
Yeah.
I
Let
freaking
me
love
just say
you.
one more quick thing.
Yeah, please. I was going to say, what final
Every
thoughts do you want to leave everybody with?
every interact. This is what I learned. I don't want to tell you to do. I'm just going to tell you what I'm doing. I realized that every interaction I have with a loved one, I can choose to either control or connect. It is impossible to do both. And so, even in that moment, that cover photo, I could choose to control and be telling him all the things he should try. And here's the reason, or just connect with him. And I'm telling you, choose connection every time. Every time, choose connection.
Put it on a shirt for your tour. Do it now. That's beautiful. All right. I love you. We'll put everything in the show notes so you folks can just click on it really easily. Thank you for spending your time with us. And I can't wait to have you back.
Thank you so much. I adore you. I really do. I adore you.